So good evening, dear voters. In just a couple of days from now, there'll be elections in Gujarat. Gujarat is gearing up for the most beautiful part of our democracy. It is that time of the year when you, the voter, gets to decide who should serve you as your neta and run the government on your taxpayer money. But as we have seen often in the recent past, in this dance of democracy, there are also allegations and debates about the trustworthiness of the electronic voting machines. From 2009 Lok Sabha polls to 2017 Uttar Pradesh civic body polls last month, political parties have repeatedly cried foul. BJP, Congress, the Aam Aadmi Party, the Samajwadi Party, the BSP, the NCP, even the left, you name it, they've all had this saying. But is there really merit in these charges? That is our debate tonight. And I have three basic questions that I want to ask our panelists. The question number one is exactly that. Is there evidence to prove, is there evidence to suggest that EVMs are being tampered with? That's the question number one that we will ask our panelists. Question number two, are electronic voting machines really the best option? In over 120 countries where a democratic system works, less than 24 actually use the electronic voting machines. Most of them are still using paper ballots. But for our country, what is the best option? And question number three, should it be mandatory now from here on, enough of the promises, enough of these delays, that with every electronic voting machine, there is a paper trail? And the EC actually checks with a higher frequency if these two match. Will that be a solution? Let's ask our panelists this evening. Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy, former CEC, who has vast amount of experience when it comes to holding elections and handling elections in our country on one side. On the other side, senior respected lawyer and founder member of the Swaraj Abhiyan, Prashant Bhushan. Mr. Krishnamurthy, I want to come to you first. As we debate this and talk about these claims and charges about tampering of EVMs, explain to our viewer, is it really possible? How many levels of security are present?
The electronic voting machines is India's pride. It is a very simple machine with a lot of credibility inside. There are enough safeguards in the machine, and it has been indigenously developed, except that the chip which is used in the machine is an imported chip. But the chip is burnt when once the program is made for doing the calculation of the votes. So if anybody says that the chip can be manipulated or from a remote operation, I think they are making a very unfair claim. This machine cannot be manipulated. It's as I told you, it is indigenously developed. It is very robust, it is credible, and there are enough safeguards in the machine which normally we don't disclose, so that there is no possibility of any manipulation. Although many people challenged this, it went up to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court asked the various parties to prove how the machine can be manipulated. They said they will not use our machine, but they will use their own machine to prove the point. The Supreme Court rejected this idea, and the very people who criticize or challenge the use of the machines, when they got elected with the use of the machines, they stopped criticizing. In fact, the present Chief Minister of Punjab and earlier the former Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, they went up to the Supreme Court challenging the machine. When they got elected, they have not said anything about the machine. So unfortunately, the losing parties claim that the machine is not credible. Now, with the introduction of paper trail, I think at least the credibility from the point of view of the political parties has improved.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, like you correctly said, even BJP's GVL Narasimha Rao wrote an entire book, and I'm giving to understand Mr. Advani had contributions to it in 2009 of whether we can actually trust these machines and whether they can be hacked. That was in 2009 when they lost. Mr. Subramaniam Swamy came out then and said, well, the rout, the wipeout of the opposition is because of these machines. Today, It's Mayawati who says BJP has manipulated the EVMs to rise to power when she loses the election and literally sees a rout that takes place in Uttar Pradesh. Akhilesh Yadav, who's been kicked out of power, says BJP has only won 15% seats in ballot paper and 46% in EVM areas. He wants an investigation that has to be done. And I can go on. Arvind Kejriwal, AAP raised a huge hue and cry. They even held their own hackathon. Mr. Prashant Bhushan, there are so many levels of checks. What makes you believe in some of these politicians that it's still possible to tamper these machines?
You see, any electronic voting machine, including the ones which the Election Commission is using, are basically electronic devices which can certainly malfunction, and many of these machines have malfunctioned, which has been admitted by the Election Commission. Now, what the Election Commission is saying, and perhaps rightly so, that these machines are essentially using a hard-wired chip and does not use any software, does not use any kind of Bluetooth device by which it can communicate with any other device or computer, etc. Let us assume that that is also the case. All that proves is that the machines as they are presently designed cannot be hacked remotely, but you can always change the chip of that machine, which takes, if you get access to a machine, replacing the chip with another chip will take you only 5 minutes, will take an IT team only 5 minutes to replace the chip. Now, the fear that a lot of people have is that it is possible for the ruling party or even for any group of IT experts, etc., if there are some officials who are guarding the machines who are colluding with this team, or if some people in the Election Commission collude with this team, it is possible for them to get access to these machines for a short while, during which time they can replace the chips and replace them with chips which can communicate with some outside device and which are capable of being manipulated. That's the fear, and it is because of these kind of fears that a large number of European countries, including Netherlands, Germany, Ireland, several states in the US like California, Virginia, etc., stopped using these electronic voting machines. That is why it has been felt that a paper trail is always safer. Now, today it is being said that all right, we will use, due to the Supreme Court's order, the Election Commission has said that we will now progressively start using voter verified paper trail. Again, there are two problems with this. Firstly, the paper trail need not necessarily be counted. It is up to the returning officer
Mr. Prashant
to
Bhushan,
decide whether the paper trail.
I do want to discuss the paper trail aspect. I'll come to that in just a bit. You made a very interesting point, and I just want to hear what Mr. Krishnamurthy has to say. That the fear is, Mr. Krishnamurthy, if there is collusion with any of the officials on ground, and even if just 10 minutes of time is given, it can be done.
I have a great respect for Mr. Prashant Bhushan. I know him personally. But I am amused by this argument saying that it is possible. Is it not possible in the paper ballot system to manipulate? In fact, the manipulations before the introduction of the machines through the paper ballot was much more serious and much more, unreliable. And I'm surprised that this argument, you can always speculate, so many things can happen. But does he know that the machine itself has got about 10 to 15 safeguards which cannot be disclosed? And the chip, he says, it can be replaced for 10 minutes. How can it be replaced? It is all sealed. It's the presence of the polling officers, it's the presence of the polling officials of the parties. How can they be replaced? It's really amusing, and it's very unconvincing. Many things are possible by speculations,
Yes.
But it is much more worse in the paper ballot system. I can tell you in Bihar and Calcutta, in some places, bogus ballot papers were stuffed in the ballot box.
Yes.
Do you think that is more credible?
Yes,
I'm
we've grown up hearing those stories of how boxes and boxes have been bogus for paper ballots have been put in. Mr. Krishnamurthy, I don't know if you can... Yes, just 1 minute, please. I wanted to ask you, the visuals that we are playing on the screens, this video that went viral, Mr. Krishnamurthy, you can put that across and answer this question of mine as well. There was a video that went viral about 3 weeks ago when there were civic body elections in Meerut, and a voter went and as he pressed the button, he claimed that he was voting for one party, but the vote went to the other, and the multiple lights were blinking. He stood there, he says, and the video is playing for our viewers right now, for an hour until people could come and tell him how to fix that, because once he's punched in that data, the vote's gone to, in this case, BJP, and he doesn't want that to happen. Can this be considered an example of hacking and tampering, or is just a malfunctioning box?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You see, in Bihar, when the machine was introduced, one of the parties said that if you touch a particular button, it will give you shock unless and until you press the button of a particular party. This is ridiculous. I think it only exposes more ignorance of the machine. I wish some of them had accepted the challenge, because this machine use was cleared after a team of 40 electronic engineers led by IIT director to see how hacking can be done. And Mr. Indiresan, who was the director in charge of the IIT, he said it is just not possible because I told them to break open the machine in any manner. In fact, in one of the northeastern states, I don't know whether you are aware, that some particular party boycotted the election. And when the results were to be announced at the time of counting, they came with the hammers and broke the machines. And unfortunately, the calculation done box was not damaged. I brought it down to Delhi in the presence of respectable witnesses of even political parties, including Communist Party of India. It was opened. The result was declared without any damage. And I only wish these people understand the nation's pride, because it's very cheap, it's very reliable, and we save tons and tons of paper. In the ballot box system, not only we waste paper, but it gives more scope for manipulations. I wish some sensible arguments are understood properly, and please let the parties do not blame the machine or the election commission. Machine cannot lie. Yes, human beings can lie, but machines cannot lie. There can be mistakes, I don't deny that.
Wrong,
because sometimes they do not know how to operate the machine.
Often go
but
wrong.
Mr. Bhushan was, telling number of complaints has been received.
Yes, machines can go wrong. They do go wrong across the country when we have elections. There are problems with the machines. These are called errors, or when they start malfunctioning in a certain way and they don't record the right result. This happens. When does it go from that to intentional tampering is what we haven't seen evidence of, which is what brings me to the second question. Is EVM the best option? And Mr. Prashant Bhushan, as we address the second question, you were mentioning globally what happens. Germany is an example where they did bring in the EVM machines and they went back to paper ballot. Do you believe that's the best option we should go back to? Well, let's keep in mind, this is a country which has population of 1.25 billion people. Mr. Krishnamurthy, I'll come to you. Let Prashant Bhushan answer that, and then you.
No, more than that.
Yeah. No. You see, I also have great respect and regard for Mr. Krishnamurthy, for his integrity and for his sincerity. But I do want to say that, you see, just believing some IT experts who say that, look, we have 10 safeguards in this machine, without really understanding what those safeguards are. See, any piece of electronics, and I say that very boldly, any piece of electronics can malfunction. However many safeguards you might put in, there is more than enough anecdotal evidence of large number of electronic voting machines malfunctioning and having had to be replaced. This is an irrefutable fact which nobody, not even Mr. Krishnamurthy, can deny. So far as stuffing of ballot papers in the earlier system is concerned, it is much easier to stuff the electronic voting machines by allowing one person to press the button 100 or 1000 times. It is much easier to do that than to physically stuff the ballot papers, etc. If booth capturing could take place earlier and ballot papers could be stuffed, that can be done much more easily with these electronic voting machines. But that is not the issue that we are discussing. We are discussing whether there is, firstly, whether these electronic voting machines are capable of being manipulated. I am saying, even assuming what the Election Commission has told us is correct, and I assume that it is correct, electronic voting machines can be manipulated if you are able to replace the chip, and that chip can be replaced prior to the polling. And that's the fear that a lot of people have. Some people have unnatural fear also about the hackability, remote hackability of the present voting machines. I am assuming that that can't be done. But if you replace the chip with another chip, then yes, it can be done. And that's the fear that people have, and that is why a large number of European countries, several states in America, after introducing the electronic voting machines, have decided to go back to paper ballots, holding and feeling that that's more reliable.
Okay.
It is the courts in Germany who ordered that Germany must go back to paper ballots.
Yes.
And that is why I am saying, given the kind of fear that is there, I think it would be safer to go back to paper ballots.
Let's not lose faith, because we have a great and a very sturdy and a beautiful democratic system, and if there are concerns, they must be addressed. But sometimes we get the wrong stories as well, Mr. Prashant Bhushan. There was a case that came from the Mumbai civic body elections a few months ago, where the candidate came out and claimed that in his own, in the booth where he is registered and he has voted, he's got 0 votes. And then the State Election Commission came out and gave us the data, and that proved that that claim was completely wrong. He was in fact registered in 2 different places, and in both places he had got a handful of votes. So sometimes are people also using this for their own benefit?
Yes, I agree with you. There is no doubt that there is a lot of unfounded fear about the capacity of these EVMs to be manipulated. As I said, you see, I agree with Mr. Krishnamurthy that probably, in all likelihood, the chips which are used in these electronic voting machines, firstly, are not capable of communicating with any outside device. Secondly, that they have no software in them. Essentially, they are hardwired machines, which means that they can't be remotely hacked or remotely manipulated. But as I said, you see, the fear today is that if some party or some people are given access to these voting machines for the night, let's say that 1,000 voting machines for one constituency are stored in one place, and for one night you give an IT team access to these machines, they can replace overnight, they can replace the chips of a significant number of these machines, so that thereafter they can remotely manipulate the votes that will be shown in those machines. That is the fear that a lot of people have. And this, so far as this argument of counting the paper ballots taking a long time is concerned, you see, earlier when paper ballots were used, the counting of the elections did not take more than maximum it took 1 day, that's all. So it's the difference between counting in a few hours and counting in, let's say, 16 hours. That's the maximum difference.
Mr. Prashant Bhushan, the fact is that the Election Commission has repeatedly answered on this. Yes. We've had 5 of our best, most respected former CECs who've come out and said, no, it's not possible. They're the people who've run this Election Commission. We've got Election Commission holding a challenge, and where we saw 0 participation. All this noise and zero participation to prove whether it can be hacked or not. So then why should we believe anybody who says it can happen?
That's what I said. No, that's what I am saying. That these, let us assume that the present EVMs with the present chips cannot be remotely hacked. But is it not possible to replace the chips? Does it take more than 10 minutes? An IT team, can they not replace the chip within 10 minutes if they get access to this machine? That's the fear that people have today. That those people in the election commission, former election commissioners, etc., will think that no, our security of these machines is good enough. The staff of the election commission is very honest, etc., and therefore it is not possible for any sort of IT team of any party to get access to these machines. But you see, that would be living in a fool's paradise. In today's age and climate, nothing can be ruled out. It cannot be ruled out that an IT team of a party will not get access to any set of voting machines, say 2 days before the election or 3 days before the election, so that they replace the chip with a chip which can communicate from outside and which is capable of being remotely hacked or remotely controlled.
Let me put that, okay, I take your point.
In mind,
remotely controlled is one option, actual replacement of the chip is the other option, for which somebody who can do this has to come in contact with these machines. Now, here is what I have read up about the security protocol. Of course, Mr. Krishnamurthy can elaborate more on it. First check is done months before the election actually takes place. It's done in front of political representatives who are going to participate in this, and the faulty ones are removed. Second check, it's a randomized selection of the EVMs that happens for any election, and this is done by computers. It's algorithmic, and it's a randomization program is used for that. Third check, randomization for the pairing of the ballot unit and control unit. That's the third check. Fourth check, EVMs are again tested for proper functioning, again in presence of, we are given to understand, political representatives, and then they are sealed with a security number and dispatched. They are dispatched to the local units and then taken to the polling booths in all of these times and places, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Is there a possibility?
You see, that can only happen in an election petition. Election petition, as you all know, takes years altogether. And I am told that the paper being used in these VVPAT machines is thermal paper, where the image goes away within the next 2 or 3 months. So therefore, that record does not remain beyond 2 or 3 months. Therefore, it is not of much use for the court in an election petition to order that, etc., because by that time, the print on that thermal paper may not remain.
Okay.
That is why I am saying that this paper trail is useful if the paper trail is also counted along with the electronic votes of the electronic voting machines.
All right. Before Mr. Krishnamurthy responds to that, quickly let's...
what the electronic voting...
Yes, let's quickly bring in some more callers, and then Mr. Krishnamurthy can take on all those questions and allay some of the fears, perhaps. Mr. Murthy is calling us. Good evening, Mr. Murthy. Do you believe that this is just some... this is something that's been created by parties who lose elections, or is there merit? Is there really fear in the minds of voters as well?
No, I have my own reservations about counting and matching it immediately at the same place. The privacy of we normally mix all the votes and then announce the result. If you are going to match it at every polling station, the practical problems of that I don't know, but the secrecy part of it is going to be affected. And in any case, if somebody can prove that the matching cannot take place, I'm sure the court will be able to be convinced, and then the machines can be withdrawn if the use of the machines. But you see, the paper trail itself is exposed to some controversy. For example, a voter goes into the polling station and says, I have voted for a particular party or a particular candidate, and says, I have seen the paper trail a different one. It's very easy for him to question it. How do you answer this? In fact, when this issue was discussed, I said, how do we meet such unfounded criticism? deliberately he can say it is not matching.
Yes.
I have actually voted for this symbol, some other symbol is coming. So
Well,
you must have a video camera to prove that.
Well,
If
I
you
need
prove
to
a
wrap
video
up
camera,
here. We're
you are going to
completely
interfere
running
with the
out of
privacy
time.
the whole thing.
But I take
Anyhow,
your point,
it's a
Mr.
debate.
Krishnamurthy. It's a debate that goes on, but it actually, it really upsets me that every single time we have elections at such giant proportions and scales that nowhere in the world we see the way it's carried out in our country and the method and the system that's used. And if someone then comes across and says, mostly it's the party that's lost that election, comes out and says that the EVMs have been tampered with, then it hurts us because you are raising fingers on a very just democratic system. If there indeed this is possible and it is happening, then let's get that evidence out and let's show it to the courts, let's show it to the Election Commission that this is how it is done. Let's solve that problem and end this debate. 55 crore people voted in 2014 Lok Sabha polls. This is the mammoth election that we have in our country. Of that, 1.4 million EVMs were used in that election. So if you talk about even a paper ballot, imagine the number of paper ballots that will come in, that will have to be transported and counted. Is EVMs better? Of course they are. But if they are tampered with or if they are malfunctioning, then it doesn't serve the purpose. 930,000 polling stations used EVMs in 2014. This is just to give you a sense of how grand our elections are, and they should stay that way. They should be clean and just, and people should have the faith that the party that they're choosing is the one that actually gets their vote. Tonight, 86% people don't believe there is enough proof out there. Perhaps the onus is on those who are raising their fingers and asking the questions to bring us that evidence so that there is this fear is out of our minds and we can actually vote and know that our vote has mattered. I thank both of our panelists. Great to have two esteemed panelists with us this evening giving their expert opinion. Dear voters, elections is where your power matters. So if you have doubts, then let's stand up and ask about it. And let's show that we have complete faith in our democratic system. Thank you for joining us.